for our second game, we have the Uncanny X-Men, which was nominated for us by @Jacko_Moran and was published by LGN. So I think you're kind of getting a feel here for what we're in for. But it was published on December 9th, 1989 for the NES.
So I have a major question for you. Has there ever been a group of canny X-Men?
That's a good question.
Ask Chris Claremont, I suppose. I think he was the one that specifically trademarked the word "uncanny" for his works. But
no, Uncanny was the original title of the series. By Jack Kirby and Stan Lee there.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, that was the original title. I meant they've been known that for ages.
Just like the Incredible Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk.
Well, I don't know if we want to get to the blunt right here, but this...
It's prime LGN. It's a prime steaming pile of LGN we've got here.
The toy makers...
Wait, so Tenga, I have to give you credit. I believe it didn't become the Uncanny X-Men until 1975.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So you are right.
Well, if we're going to talk about real comics, X-Men is not really the place to start, because I think that has one of the most convoluted canons of any comic book series.
When you have like 50 characters of note in it, they usually
I think it's hundreds at this point. I think you got at least maybe 100. You could probably like, oh yeah, I've heard of that guy. And it's kind of sad, though, because the X-Men nowadays, because of a trade, or not a trademark dispute, but sort of a licensing issue between Fox and Marvel/Disney, they've been slowly trying to kill them off and kind of, or at least shove them off into a corner in the comics, and instead introduce the Inhumans, or whatever it is. I think it's the Inhumans.
Once Disney gets them back, they'll stop being lame in the comics.
Right.
You guys want to talk about the game?
The only thing that would have made this game worse is if it had been an Inhumans game, because then it wouldn't even have the license to back it up.
Well, anyway, I'll put the kibosh in real comics talk here, and
I think it's important we bring that up, because this game is about as much of a mess as the whole licensing issues and the canon surrounding
this
the game.
This is literally one of the worst NES games ever made, and that's no exaggeration. It's awful.
You have probably. I mean, I know the AVGN did a video about this, so that's one point against it, that it is. Well, actually did so on several X-Men games, but this one is just a black hole of quality. I'm not
even sure the game was finished. Like, there's bits and pieces in it that make it seem like it was it's just like a test game or something.
It was finished, but only in the absolute you can complete it.
So explain to the listeners what kind of game this is. Explain what the action is like. Explain what the action is like here for the listeners.
Okay, so for those of you who haven't played the game, or who haven't already cracked open a video to see what the game is, basically it's this sort of top-down shooter/brawler sort of thing. Like, okay, so you get a team of 6 X-Men to choose from. You've got half of them, can have some sort of blast attack, so that would be Cyclops, Iceman, and Storm. And then the other half are all brawlers. They can only punch enemies, and that would consist of Wolverine, Colossus, and Nightcrawler. I believe each of the characters has some of them have unique abilities. Like, there's a jump button, which I don't think that actually does anything unless your character has a special ability. In which case, I think Iceman can fly. Storm, I think, can also fly. And Nightcrawler can fly through walls. Everybody else, I think, just jumps.
Wait, they actually have Nightcrawler's BAMF in here? I couldn't even figure that out.
So I have to say that this is the only way I can explain this game is if anybody's looked into Square's early games, it's kind of like King's Knight, but worse somehow.
And King's Knight isn't exactly a prize pig either.
King's Knight is a piece of garbage, but it's at least functional.
Yeah, this is barely on the cusp of being a functional game. I mean, I don't know what the goal even is in the game, because, okay, so for some reason this game has mandatory co-op. If you're playing single player, you have to pick at least 2 X-Men, and odds are good if you're playing by yourself, or even if you're playing with another human being, one of the X-Men is going to die, even if you somehow manage to beat a stage. So
it's like
you're going to be down one guy at that point.
It's like Proto-Daikatana,
except the AI's even dumber. Like,
that's a feat. Oh my god! Like, John Romero will give you credit with where it's due.
Like all the X-Men
and then make
in the game also.
Bitch.
God damn it!
All of the X-Men in the game, though, they have a stat, and one of the stats is willpower, and I assume that's supposed to be how smart the AI is, but they all behave exactly the same. They just will run into a pit and die, or a laser beam, or a crushing door and die instantly.
No, when you say that the AI, die and then they leave, between stages, do you essentially just lose an X-Men and then you have a certain set list? You permanently lose an
X-Men, I believe, unless you go to the training stage again. There is a training stage. And in order to exit it, I actually had to look this one up because there's no obvious exit. It's just this small little arena where you can just shoot enemies and stuff and walk around. You have to hold A, B, and start, and apparently that will replenish your team. So I guess you take them to the danger room, whatever you call it. They couldn't even get the names of the various X-Men things right, or even had any sort of.
It's called the time chamber or whatever from Dragon Ball Z, right?
What?
Yeah, the metabolic time chamber.
There we go.
One thing I have to bring up as well is that LJN was just a publisher of titles, and it was like a sister publisher to Acclaim. So, like, they didn't make this. It was made by a company called Pixel. Did anybody do any research on Pixel?
Isn't it allegedly made by Pixel? I believe that they never actually.
It was probably farmed out.
They never put their hand up and said,
maybe Pixel is like an Alan Smithy title. For all we know, this was something made by. I don't know, Atlas. Like, I know
this game doesn't have credits or anything. Like, no one will tell you who made this game. They were so proud of this game, they won't tell you who made it.
There's a further question. Was this made by a Japanese or an American company?
It was made by a Japanese company. Pixel's a Japanese company, and I'll tell you a couple other notable titles that they made. They programmed Baseball Stars 2 for the NES.
Huh.
Which is a decent game. It's not as good as the original on NES or any of the arcade games, but it's a good game. It's not terrible. And they actually helped program Over Horizon, which is one of our favorites, actually.
Over Horizon's hot B.
So you have a semi that has a company that has some pedigree. I know some LJN games were actually made by Atlas and Rare. Of all companies, and a lot of them turned out terrible. There's some real crap here in LJN, but they were all made by different companies. Is my point? They were probably just in development for a few weeks, just made to sell the license. This is an absolute crap game, and nobody should play it unless they want to. It's not even good bad. It's just
okay. Here's a good indication of quality. So, in order to beat the game, you first have to beat the previous. You have to beat 4 of the main stages. There's a training stage and then 4 main stages. Then you have to use a code to access the final stage. And in order to do that, you have to hold a certain key combination at the title screen, I believe, or at the level select screen. Now they actually published they actually put the code on the cartridge itself, but they printed it wrong. It's actually missing one of the buttons you need to press to be able to reach the final stage. So you can't even technically beat the game.
And
allegedly, they were supposed to put it in the game, and then they didn't.
Friday the 13th, by the way, was made by Atlas. Just so you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a long road to Shin Megami Tensei for them.
I mean, you guys, you definitely. I don't know if really you're sticking it to this game. You're refusing to talk about this game, and I can't imagine why. But this it is bad, but it is at least it has like at least this sort of fun Japanese NES licensed title surrealism to it, which I think at least elevates it slightly.
Right, the visuals are kind of interesting. Some of the enemy types are amusing, if not threatening.
And have nothing to do with the X-Men, by the way. Just like
hi kids, I'm Eyeball Spring.
I liken it to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first one. It has, like, the enemies have absolutely nothing to do with it.
Guys made of fire and chainsaw murderers and all that. Like,
well, this game half the enemies are just like cubes or something. Like, they're not actual things, they're just shapes. It's weird.
Well, you get to fight skeletons in, like, Geiger-esque, like, chomping teeth.
Logan and the Argonauts.
Yeah, I think that's stage 4, which it's interesting. Some of the stages actually do mirror things that exist in the X-Men comics. Like there's one stage that says destroy the robot factory. And you're like, oh, it's the Sentinel factory. And it's just a generic, it's just a generic gray tile set with some vaguely robotic-looking enemies. Then there's attack the bioship, and it's like, oh, is that the Brood? Which I don't know if they existed at that point. I think they did. Right, and there's another stage that references, I think that's like, oh, that could have been the Phalanx, but again, it's not. And same thing with the bioship. It's just like, it's basically Salamander from a top-down view, you know, and you can walk around in these sort of weird gut, you know, they look like guts and stuff. And
no, that's nice.
It is, but it's like, with a little bit of a tweak, it could have been related to the X-Men. That's the fascinating thing about this game, is there actually are elements that are mirrored in the comics, but they didn't even bother to do that. They just threw in eyeball springs and weird centipede monsters and
this game really like broke my heart as a kid, because I was a huge comic book fan, and I was also a big fan of Batman and the animated series, and X-Men the animated series. I just love stuff like that, and like this was before X-Men in the animated series, but like when I was growing up, I had an NES, and I was watching it, so like I would go out and rent it, right? So you know, you go and you play something like this, and there's no good representation of the X-Men. Like there's nothing good until Konami's arcade title. There's really nothing good X-Men related for a long time.
I mean, it definitely feels like a very curious, generic game, which definitely just has like the X-Men kind of smudged on top hastily.
And then they made other games, like other X-Men games, like Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge, which is also garbage. Like, it's
slightly more playable. You can at least beat the first stage, which is actually it's actually a fun little stage, and then the rest are like, we're going to drop you into a bottomless pit full of spikes and crushers and stuff.
Our focus does kind of keep drifting away from the NES game.
It's hard to talk about this game because outside of the disappointment, outside of the terrible graphics and, you know, the dubious mechanics and the fact that the game's not even beatable unless you go online nowadays to look up the code. It's select being an up and start, I believe, is the actual code, but they cut off the part that says select. So
yeah, like there isn't too much.
Well, you know, with that like sort of summary of the experience, let's just rein this one in. I think let's put it somewhere.
Right.
You know where it's going, but let's put it somewhere.
I think it's the worst game. I
refuse to dethrone Eek the Cat over this.
Yeah, but Eek the Cat is functional.
Fuck, God damn it, Cal.
Eek the Cat is at least functional. Like
I think this game is functional.
I don't think so.
It's functional in the sense that you can play it, you can put it in your NES, hits the start button, maybe pick two X-Men and die.
It's as quote-unquote functional as a fucking Tennessee Williams play. I do not... No, that's an esoteric reference. I just do not know what the hell I am doing with this. Maybe it's my fault I can't understand this game, but I'm getting the impression that I'm not the only one who's lost on it.
The rules are not clear. The hit detection is non-existent. It's a buggy mess. You can't even beat it unless you cheat. It's a complete piece of garbage. There's no good reason to play.
But are you saying you'd rather play Eek the Cat?
Yes.
That's what I want to make sure. I want to hear this. Like, I want to say, I would rather play a platformer that is an escort quest for the entire game than play this.
Look, I would rather play that and Krusty's Funhouse at the same time.
You're insane. You're crazy, man. That's too much.
Here's the thing, Cal. This game also has an escort mission. You always have to pick two players and one player.
Yeah, but that guy dies straight away. It's fine.
You could switch between them at will, but one of them's always going to die. It's an escort mission. You can't even win.
Yes, but it doesn't punish you much. You know, like as you said, you can somehow revive your character.
That's assuming you could beat a stage, though. Like, every time you die, you lose an X-Men, so you'll probably end up with Nightcrawler by the end of it, who can't... He, like, dies in a single hit to anything. He can't do a damn thing.
Just play as Iceman, and you'll be fine, okay?
Look, the only NES game that I can even pick out to be worse than this game is Dragon's Lair.
Okay, well, look, Dragon's Lair isn't even, like, it goes in Crazy Bus Town. It's not even a game.
Yeah, it got published and it got the Nintendo seal of quality, sir.
Well, I believe that Nintendo are very frivolous with their alleged seal of quality.
You're probably right.
Well, look, if you guys want to dethrone Eek, I'm not going to stop you. I'm just gonna, as long as you're all aware what you're doing here.
Look, we're picking between piles of crap right here.
I know, and you gotta pick one to eat, and you have to decide.
I'm going to see if I can actually try and justify this. I think that, like, the ultimate insult about the X-Men game is that absolutely nothing in it has to do with the X-Men, except for their character portraits. That's the only thing. If you took those out...
And the in-game sprites, I mean, they all use the same body, but they at least have heads that look vaguely like the X-Men.
Say what you want about Silver Surfer. At least it had something to do with Silver Surfer comics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like that's a bad game too, but at least it has some
I don't know whether
in it.
It's a bad game, but it's fun.
It tries to be a game, not like this.
It's addictive.
Out the
it's
door.
At least addictive.
Yeah.
Like, you try to beat that game. There's a challenge to trying to beat that game, right? You could play that with your friends and have a good time.
Yeah,
I could never have a good time with Uncanny X-Men.
Yeah, I mean, Silver Surfer is way too hard for
Did
its own
anyone
good.
play Uncanny X-Men with a second person? Because you are saying it is kind of co-op, and I assume no one actually.
I'm pretty sure it would be just as bad because there are a lot of things on the board that'll instantly kill you if you just stand on them for 2 seconds. Enemies can spawn on top of you and kill you instantly. There are crushers and laser beams that you have to wait for enemies to drop a specific power up so you can walk through them without dying. And in single player, what happens is the AI will always hit one of those and die. You're pretty much giving somebody up to this, No, what I mean is, like a lamb to the slaughter. And okay, here's the other thing. It has that kind of scrolling where the screen only scrolls if both players are in the right spot. So you're probably going to spend a lot of the game trapped, and the other, the players are going to get like smushed between things and die. It's probably not going to be any better with the second person.
I'm also going to go out on a limb and say that this is probably the worst game that LJN ever published.
And
that's saying a lot.
Yeah. I think maybe
I can't think of anything that's worse.
Maybe Back to the Future, but Back to the Future 2 and 3. Those ones are really horrendous, but this one
Back to the Future 2 and 3 is really bad.
Yeah, no kidding. I actually rented that one and I have bad memories. This one I haven't played until recently, but if I had played it back then, I think I would have been as crushed as you were, and that I would have feel totally suckered. Like, this is the shit that LJN kept pulling. Like, they just try to sell things on name recognition alone without giving a crap about the quality. And that should be criminal, I think.
And the cover's pretty neat. It looks exactly like the front of a comic book.
That's the most X-Men that this game has to do with it. The freaking cover. None of that's in the game. It's just, it's a total lie. Fakers. Cheaters. Bastards.
They only released this in the U.S. They didn't release this to the rest of the world, so that's something.
Yeah, I'm not in the U.S., so I have no ill memories of this game.
Well, I'll say this about the Uncanny X-Men versus Eek the Cat. With Eek the Cat, you're not expecting really a good game. I mean, I love the show. I love it.
I'm surprised because you like Eek the Cat.
I love Eek the Cat, but you don't really expect a show like that to have a really good game associated with it. Whereas with X-Men, it's like that's almost pure action. Like you could think of so many good games you could make out of that, and Konami did. Sega did. I think Raven Software made a really good Wolverine game. Like there is the potential there, but this game, it doesn't even have not even the license saves it. Not even the license.
It's the worst X-Men game as well. There's nothing that even comes close to it.
It is a game.
I don't need to defend this game from being bad. I know it's bad.
Right. I understand the arguments you're making here because Eek is pretty bad too. But Eek is the game itself is at least. I mean, it's based off the pilot episode, I believe, where he has to basically has to escort somebody, but he dies in the process.
In the sense that it's literally a different game that has had Eek the Cat added into it. That's the experience.
Right. But the original game itself was probably functional. I meant it didn't have the license associated with it, but it was playable.
I'm willing to let it go below Eek the Cat, and the main reason, which no one has mentioned, and I was hoping someone would, but Eek the Cat has a decent soundtrack that you can actually listen to outside of the game. You can download the soundtrack and listen to it and enjoy. I don't know. Did you mention it this time?
I might have just briefly said so. I did want to say though that what's the soundtrack with X-Men? It's nothing. It's generic. It's exactly. It's bleeps and bloops. It's the stereotype that you get of that.
It's really bad, yes. So
I forget who composed for Eek the Cat, but credit for him for not making it an absolute abomination.
I'm happy to declare the Uncanny X-Men to literally be the worst game of all time to date. And I don't think
of all
any
time. So far, it's of all time.
Until we get to Dragon's Lair NES.
Do not submit Dragon's Lair NES to us.
God damn it! Abort! Like, we're gonna attract reverse psychology.
Okay. I'm gonna drop the gavel here, and I'm gonna say, let the record show. Uncanny X-Men for the NES is the absolute worst game ever released. Worse than Eek the Cat, worse than Caverns of Kafka, even worse than Amagon.
And that's scientific.